Hello and welcome to another video, and in this one we're taking a mod spotlight at the Real Orbits mod. This essentially answers the question, what if Space Engineers was more like Kerbal Space Program? And it turns out the answer to that is pretty damn awesome, as it brings in orbital mechanics and orbital maneuvers into the game, which I have always wanted to have, and now we do. We're going to be taking a look at the mod. It's pretty involved in setting up. You have to do several steps to make sure it works properly. How you actually use the mod, like, we're going to have to know some orbital maneuvers and orbital mechanics and a lot of terminology in order to move ourselves easily through the gravity. And then some fun uses you could do with this mod. So first thing, how you set it up? Well, you can't just slap the mod on. That's too easy. What you actually need to do is rebuild every planet. So this is a solar system start that I made. Then I deleted every single planet. Then I replaced every single planet. Then I used this Space Engineers toolbox to move them back to their exact starting locations. So this world here is essentially the Earth start, like the solar system start, with all the different planets out there. But now they have the proper gravity. It doesn't work 100%. The gravity of Earth actually extends out past the moon in the game, which is quite interesting, but also makes it so that the mod actually doesn't work around the moon because it doesn't like multiple gravity fields. So I think what I'll probably have to do if I ever use this in an actual playthrough is I'll have to, say for example, slide the moon out further away from the Earth or reposition it slightly so that I could have that be its entirely separate gravity bubble, and then probably the same thing for the other moons like Mars and Europa and Alien and Titan. So that way they have their own separate gravity bubbles and there's not going to be any conflicts. But as we can see here, we have got a stable orbit around Earth-like. We've actually got a little orbiter there, which is the same as this little ship here that we're going to be riding on, and I'm going to attempt to rendezvous with it, but it's probably not going to work. The other thing this needs has a couple dependency mods. 100% needs Text HUD API, that mod, just to function. But also, you need some sort of speed mod. I currently have an infinite speed mod on, but as long as it gets up to, say, a kilometer per second, 1,000 meters per second, then it'll probably work. As, for example, that orbiter, which is about approximately a 100-kilometer stable orbit, is 600-ish meters per second. So that shows you how fast you need to be going at a reasonable orbit. You probably don't need to be going that fast, and you'll definitely won't need to go that fast for any of the smaller planets or the planets with lesser gravity. So while that orbiter is coming in, we should probably get off and get out of here and get into orbit, because we need to be able to catch up with it. So we'll aim for the moon here. That was essentially my target for liftoff. And we'll blast on off. And ooh, baby, our apoapsis is a little high. We'll pull that down. Now we're going to be going over all these terminology, as it is very important to have. So we'll pull down our apoapsis to about 100 kilometers here as we are sailing up into the sky. So in the bottom left there, you have your orbital status. We're in an unstable, decaying orbit. And the reason why that is unstable is that we simply don't have enough speed. We've got a lot of speed going up, as in we will reach a height, but then we will crash down and we can see our orbit ending in this mountain range here, and that will end our lives most likely if we choose to just let that occur. So when we get to the height of our orbit, our apoapsis, which is the highest point in our orbit, we are going to add more speed to the sideways momentum. So that way we have enough so that when we fall towards the planet, you have enough sideways direction so that instead of falling down, we fall to the side and we fall around the planet, which is essentially how orbits work. So we got another 50 seconds until we reach our apoapsis, our highest point, in which case we're going to burn forward in our orbit and try to raise our periapsis, which is the lowest point, to a spot about the same, about 100 kilometers. That's our goal. And we'll try to circularize. So I got another 30 seconds here. The other stats down there, the E is eccentricity, basically how circular you are. A 1 would be a straight line, and a 0 would be a perfect circle. So we are quite linear in our orbit right now. We're going to try to lower that number as much as possible. Our inclination is how inclined we are from the equator. So we are 80 degrees up, where 90 is perfect, northern, like a polar orbit. You're orbiting over the poles, and a 0 would be you're orbiting the equator. So we are quite a polar orbit here. And the last one there, T, being the time. So we can see we're 1 minute and 25 seconds to our periapsis. We are 10 minutes and 26 seconds to our apoapsis, and the whole thing takes 18 minutes and 7 seconds. So our orbiter here is just 6 kilometers away, so I think we should be able to just burn towards it here, I'd like to hope. We'll turn off our big thruster and just use our little thruster, and try to kill some of our velocity this way. And we'll try to do an approach and do a rendezvous. And hopefully we'll be able to auto-dampen to Orbiter 1, and then we'll be able to fly in formation and be in orbit together. But as you can see right now, if I take a look at our orbits, they are vastly different. Our apoapsis here is at 143 kilometers, where that's more like at 101 kilometers. So if we just leave this as is, we will fly away from this orbiter. So I'm just giving little adjustments as I'm moving towards it. Just trying to close this gap. Giving it a little bit of speed so we can just get in closer to it. And then once we get there, we'll dampen up to it and hopefully get to formation. Now, every direction that you point when you are in your orbiter has a name. And we'll be going over theirs just a moment from now. I just got it. Oh god, okay, there's the orbiter. Okay, I gotta... Oh god, I'm slipping by it. Whoa, I got out of my ship. That's not the right button. No, he's now going over there. He's a kilometer away that way. Although I am getting my orbit very close to his. Now it's 1 kilometer, like a 100 kilometer orbit. So we are not moving from each other very much. So I should just be able to get myself a light burn and move in on him again. He's going slightly this way. Again, just slight adjustments as we try to come in for the rendezvous. This certainly does make the rendezvousing with another ship in orbit so much harder, because you actually have to think about this stuff of like, oh goddamn, okay, I gotta time my launch so that I'm relatively close by, and then I have to make these slight adjustments and then coast into the ship here as I slowly adjust my orbit and affect it all, and all while doing this with dampeners off, I might add, because if you have your dampeners on, oh baby, you will never be able to orbit properly. And here we are. There's Orbiter 1. We're going to close here at just a few meters per second. But we have managed to successfully rendezvous with another ship in orbit. And now, if we auto-dampen to that, it'll sync up our orbits. And we are good. We have auto-dampened to our other orbiter. And we can then just sit beside it here. And I'm tempted to just turn off all my thrusters before I okay, turn my dampeners are off. Turn all my thrusters back on. We're good. There's our two orbiters side by side, orbiting Earth-like. Yes! Alright. Alright, so we're going to go over the different directions and how to do different orbital maneuvers. Because each direction you point will have a different effect on your orbital shape. The easiest one to understand is prograde. It's forward. And when you point prograde, you will raise your orbit, but not where you are. You will raise it on the other side of the planet. So if we're currently right here, and I burn prograde, the orbit would get larger over here. Because I'm putting more energy into the orbit here, I'm going to go higher on this side, and then I'm going to fall back down. It does not affect your periapsis, your lowest point. It might a little bit, but because you're just adding more energy into the whole orbit. But realistically, you're just going to raise your apoapsis, your highest point. The other one is to point retrograde, which is to point behind your orbit, like the opposite direction. When you do that, you're going to be lowering your orbit. You're going to be taking away energy. So if we burned retrograde, our orbit would come tighter to the planet. And even to the point where if we burned too much, we would come back into the planet's atmosphere. And then we would burn up their atmosphere, or if we had an aerodynamics or aerodynamic heat mod, it'd be a great complement to that. Because then you have to actually worry about that orbital velocity when you're coming into land. I'm just going to just slightly move away from orbit 1 here. Just because. Don't want to bump into it. One of the next orbital maneuvers is we're going to want radial in and radial out. And what that means is that this is our orbital direction here. Radial in is pointing towards the object you're orbiting, and radial out is pointing away from the object you're orbiting. And this actually doesn't really change the shape of your orbit at all. It just changes the position. So if you point inwards and you're pointing towards Earth, what you're going to do is you're going to take this area here, locally it's going to lower it down. But it's actually going to raise the opposite side approximately the same amount. So essentially what you're doing is you're just taking the whole orbit and then going and shifting it to the side. So that's how you can say if you have an orbit that is fairly circular, but is close here, but far away over here, you could center it a bit better. Important to note, radial in and out for moving your orbit is actually very fuel intensive. It's actually better to prograde and retrograde burn to raise and lower your periapsis and apoapsis instead, as it is way more efficient for your fuel. And then the last two are called the normal and anti-normal. And I'm pretty sure normal is to the left of your orbital direction, and anti-normal is to the right of your orbital direction. And what those do, it changes your inclination. So if I wanted this orbit to, you can see here, if I line myself up to the equator on Earth, we are very polar with our orbits. We are essentially a perfectly polar orbit. We are at what, currently 84.9 degrees inclination, which is extremely polar. 0 degrees inclination would be going across the equator here, and 90 would be up and down. Say, for example, if we want to actually get to that 90, we have to think about, okay, if there is an axle through the planet right here, how do we want to turn that? So we're going to want to turn this end of it this way, and that end of it that way. So, depending on where we are in the orbit, we're currently down here, we would want to push this end that way, this way, which would cause us to be more polar. So, for example, if we wanted to be more polar, which direction are we going here? We're going this direction, and we'd want to, I believe, point towards the sun? Yeah, point towards the sun. So I'll point this direction and burn a little bit, and our inclination would increase. Now you actually have to think about that. You're not exactly pointing directly 90 degrees to your left or right. Because if you do that, you're going to add a little bit of speed to your orbit. So I'm going to leave the orbiter here. Good job, orbiter. We're going to leave you there. We're going to change our inclination and stuff a bit. So I'm going to turn off my dampeners and let's push away a little bit. And I want to change my inclination. So currently I'm at 84.9 and I'm pointing to the anti-normal to my right from my orbital direction. If I burn this way, you'll see both my apoapsis will increase and my inclination will change. So I'm getting 84, let's turn off the big thruster here, 84.7654. Oh, I'm actually lowering my my inclination, so I want to burn the other direction here. So let's burn the other direction. There we go. Yeah, now we're starting to get the inclination change in the direction we want to go for a polar orbit. But you can see that my apoapsis and periapsis are changing. That's because I'm adding speed into my orbit. And oh god, there's a station there. Hopefully my orbiter doesn't hit that station. It shouldn't. It should pass in front of it. But stay out of my orbit, station. So what you want to do, if you actually want to change your inclination without changing your apoapsis and periapsis, you have to think of it like a car. When it's drifting around a corner, the nose of the car doesn't actually like point down the road that it's going down. It points like to the center of the turn. You know what I mean? And the butt of the car swings around the turn, and at the very end the car pulls forward and comes out of the turn. It's the same thing. What you want to do is you've gone your prograde, which is forward, 90 degrees left, and then throw it another like 15, 10, 20 degrees kind of feel. And now when I burn, I'm burning slightly retrograde as well, which is going to slow down my orbit and lower my apoapsis. Okay, that's a bit too much. Back a little bit. Back a little bit. Right there. There's a little balance point where I'm not going to change my apoapsis and periapsis by much, but my inclination is changing rapidly. And that's how you change your inclination without changing your actual orbital shape. So it's a nice little balance that you have to find. So you can see now my inclination is vastly different compared to the previous one. Also, for a lot of orbital maneuvers, it involves timing. So for example, if I wanted to make myself more polar, what I should actually do is I should wait until I'm at the equator before I burn, because that then becomes the area at which I'm rotating on. That'll be the axle, because essentially where I was burning down here was the axle of the rotation. You can see how my two orbits there of my ships were because I burned at this location. That's where I changed it. So if I want to be northern orbit, I have to wait until I'm over the equator before I burn. So I have to wait till I'm there, which will be in a minute or two here. Yeah, so orbital mechanics, there's like a lot you have to think about in terms of like which direction do I need to go and what direction I need to point, and how am I affecting the other aspects of my orbit by burning here for that reason. I have to counteract it with a retrograde burn or a prograde burn to offset those effects. And then also I have to think about, okay, well, if I really want to do this, I should wait until I'm in the right position to do this. So for example, here we are coming up on what will be a anti-normal to our right burn over top of the equator, which is good. This is what we want. So we are currently over top of the equator. It is time for an anti-normal burn. We're going to burn this direction. We're going to burn hard this direction. And we see we're changing our inclination, and our inclination is raising, raising, raising. And we got our inclination 90 degrees. We actually got it slightly over the top there. Burn back the other direction. Boom! 90 degree inclination. Our apoapsis is a little high, so we'll burn retrograde here. I'm just burning backwards to lower it back down. And now, there we go. We are in a perfectly polar orbit in our 100-kilometer-ish stable orbit. So this is how you maneuver around. You got your prograde, your retrograde, your radial in, radial out, your normal and anti-normal directions. So if we wanted to, say, go to a particular planet, like we wanted to transfer to the moon, we would want to wait until, or like align our orbit with the moon, wait until we're on the other side of the planet from the moon, and then burn prograde to raise our apoapsis, our highest point, up till it intersects with the moon. And that's how you would transfer to another planet. Well, let's see if we got an example here that we can do. There's Triton. We're kind of aligned with Triton. We could, as we're coming along the downslope here with Orbiter 2, when we are here-ish, we could burn prograde to escape and go for Triton. You probably want to burn a little past prograde, because we're going to get so much speed that this isn't going to hold us properly, and we're going to skip out the bottom like this, because the gravity for Earth won't hold us. So once we are another couple minutes here, we could transfer, and then we could head off to Triton, flying through the void at probably about 1 kilometer per second, whatever the escape velocity here is for Earth-like. And then when we get to Triton, we would do some slight adjustments to get our periapsis down to a reasonable height. Then when we reach that periapsis, we burn to break, burning retrograde, so that we capture around Triton. And so it's a very long, complicated process in order to properly go from planet to planet, or even to planet to moon, considering you'd have to slide this moon out probably about double the distance it is currently in order for these orbits to work properly. And I have turned off all of the asteroids, because that is another thing to recommend. Turn off your asteroids, otherwise your orbiters are going to be just like bugs on a windshield as they do their orbits. Orbiter 1 and 2 are reaching a good position here in a minute. We will do our transfer to Triton, and then as we are flying through the void, that'll probably be the end of the video. So we're getting good there. We're almost to the point where we want to start just burning hard prograde. So we're going to look prograde. We're going to turn our big ass thruster, and we're going to burn hard until we see we have escape trajectory. Our periapsis is 100 kilometers, but our apoapsis is gone, as we are going to escape the planet's gravity. I'm not sure where we're going to escape here, so I'm actually going to burn a little bit more. I'm going to get us up to 1 kilometer per second here. And okay, it's all gone. My periapsis and apoapsis have left. We are leaving Orbiter 1 behind, and we have our massive amount of speed. Ah, there we go. Look at that orbit. With the escape director there, it's all the way out to Triton. So if there should be a way I can do this. Yes, press F9 so I can control my ship. And I'm just going to give it little taps here to bring my orbit down. And do these little adjustments. There we go. So now my orbit is going to take me relatively close to Triton. And then once I get to here, all I have to do is circularize. I just brake on Triton's gravity and then go around. Excellent. But we are not going to wait for that, as it's going to take way too long. It is 15 hours, if I'm reading that correctly, for me to get back to my periapsis, which is not in the scope of this video. But that's how you transfer to another planet. You align your orbit with the planet, then you, on the opposite side, burn until you can get your periaps, your highest point in your orbit, all the way out to that other planet. Then right out, and then once we get to here, the closest point, we'll burn retrograde, slow ourselves down, and then capture around Triton, then eventually burn retrograde, come through the atmosphere, and land. I'm actually really excited about this mod, and it makes me want to... it's too bad that I've already sort of set up what I'm going to do for Season 4. I'm thinking this might be Season 5 kind of stuff. Have a great return to space, and basically make What If Space Engineers was Kerbal Space Program for Season 5. As our orbiter here is taken off. But that's going to be it for now. I think this is an amazing mod, and I plan to use it to experiment in the future. Make satellites and orbital transfers. Oh, it's so good. Thanks for watching. Good hunting out there, fellow space engineers.